Content warning. This episode discusses burnout, overwork, and the physical and emotional impacts of chronic stress. Please listen with care. I want to start with a question that might challenge something that you've been taught to believe. What if success wasn't supposed to feel like constant pressure? What if the exhaustion, the pushing, the always on energy that so many of us have been normalized in business isn't actually a requirement for success, but a byproduct of a model that was never designed for us women in mind? There was a time in my career when I believed that the only way to succeed was to outwork everyone in the room, to be available, responsive, productive, constantly moving. I associated momentum with effort and effort with worth. And from the outside, it actually worked for a time. I was producing results. I was advancing. I was building. But internally, I was operating in a constant state of depletion. My energy was inconsistent. My clarity would come in waves. And I found myself overriding my own instincts just to maintain the pace. And at the time, I really thought the problem was me, that I needed to be more disciplined, more consistent, more resilient. But what I understand now is that I was trying to force myself into a model of success that was fundamentally misaligned with how I naturally operate. And once I stopped forcing and started building differently, everything changed. Welcome to the Inspired Podcast. I'm Andrea De La Cerda, CEO, founder, and business coach, and someone who has built multiple businesses while learning, often the hard way, that sustainability matters just as much as success. This podcast is about helping you build a life and a business that is aligned, not just profitable, but intentionally expansive and grounded in who you actually are. Today, we're talking about something that is both deeply practical and also deeply transformative: feminine power in business. What is that? I want to be clear. This is also not about gender. It's about energy and approach. What we often call masculine business models are linear, they're output driven, they're built on consistency and control. And what we often call feminine approaches to business are cyclical, they're intuitive, collaborative, and responses. Both are valuable and both do matter in business. But most traditional business models, they actually overemphasize one and undervalue the other. And that imbalance is actually what's costing women not just their energy, but their longevity in the corporate world. Let's talk about the hustle culture. The idea that success comes from working harder, doing more, and pushing through. There's data showing that chronic overwork is actually directly linked to burnout, decreased cognitive performance, and long-term health issues. The World Health Organization has classified burnout as an occupational phenomenon driven by unmanaged workplace stress. Studies also show that working beyond a certain threshold, typically 50 to 55 hours a week, does not significantly increase your productivity. And actually, in many cases, it decreases it. But yet, the workplace narrative persists. More hours, more effort means more success. And I lived inside that narrative for a long time, and many of you are as well. I remember periods where I was working constantly, moving from one demand to the next, holding multiple responsibilities, building, delivering, leading, without ever truly pausing to ask whether the way I was working was sustainable. And what I began to notice was that my best ideas, my clearest thinking, my most aligned decisions never came from force. As a matter of fact, they came from space. They came from moments where I allowed myself to just step back, reflect, think for a minute, just reconnect with myself. That realization became the turning point because I started to see that success wasn't about how much I could push, which wasn't really natural for me all the time anyway. What emerged from that shift and what I now teach is a just different framework. It's a feminine blueprint for what building a business that is both profitable and sustainable. So let's talk about 5 principles of feminine business building, so you completely understand where I'm coming from. The first is alignment before action. So instead of asking, what should I do next? You begin with, what is aligned? What inside do I know needs to happen next? This requires clarity, though, around your values, your strengths, and your vision. But think of it as like a gut check, because when action is aligned, it becomes more effective and often more efficient, even easier, like you're going with the flow. cyclical productivity instead of constant output. This traditional model expects consistent output regardless of your energy. But, the feminine certainly knows that human energy is not linear. For many women, there are natural cycles of energy, creativity, and focus. Research shows that hormonal fluctuations throughout the menstrual cycle can influence your cognitive performance, energy levels, and even your communication styles. So when you begin to work with those rhythms rather than against them, you can optimize for things like creative work during those high energy phases, also strategic thinking during those reflective phases, and then also rest when your body signals the need to rest. Even beyond biology, this principle applies seasonally. There are periods for growth in the year, there for visibility, for execution, and there's also periods for rest, integration, and recalibration. And third, intention as a strategic asset. So in many traditional environments, intuition, that gut, is dismissed as unreliable. But actually, in reality, intuition is pattern recognition informed by experience. It's your subconscious mind in that gut instinct, in that weird intuitive response or reflection. When I look at some of the most important decisions that I've made in my business, whether hiring, new partnerships, new strategic direction, they were not purely analytical. They were informed by data and guided by instinct. As a matter of fact, I had a recent vision meeting with one of my companies earlier this week or last week. And the question was asked, how do you know that this is the right direction? Like, what research have you done? And I had to be honest. I had to tell, of course, the research that had been done to understand that this was the next move, but then also to communicate that if you trust me, because I'm going with my gut on this instinct that I do believe and know to be true. The key is not choosing intuition over strategy, though. It's really just integrating both. And then fourth, collaboration over isolation, that hustle culture. It often glorifies independence, doing everything yourself. But feminine leadership recognizes the power of collaboration, building relationships, leveraging collective intelligence, creating ecosystems where value flows in multiple directions. In my own business, some of the most impactful growth has come through partnerships and shared vision, not just individual effort. In fact, almost everything that I created is from there. And then fifth, sustainability is a success metric. So instead of measuring success only by revenue or growth, you can also measure by your energy, fulfillment, capacity, long-term impact you're going to have in the world. Because a business that generates revenue but depletes you is not inherently sustainable. I've seen this approach work across different levels of business. I've worked with women who've shifted from constant output to more intentional, cyclical work. I saw both their revenue and their well-being improve. And a lot of times that translates to their families as well. One client, for example, moved away from trying to be visible every day on every platform and instead focused on strategic, high-impact visibility that was really aligned with her energy. She reduced her output, but increased her results. Another example is founders who build businesses around their natural rhythm. So launching during like really high energy periods, creating during quieter phases, building in rest without the guilt. The rest is necessary for our growth. So reframing that is an important principle. A business coach of mine even integrated one entire week per month dedicated to her own rest and recreation. One whole week a month. Think about that. That's 12 weeks a year dedicated to only rest and recreation every month. There are also well-documented examples of women building multi-million-dollar businesses while prioritizing flexibility, collaboration, and aligned growth. The common thread is not less ambition. It's just a different approach to achieving it. This is a really important point. So for me, this shift, and for most of us, this shift requires a lot of unlearning, right? Unlearning the belief that my worth was tied to how much I produced. Unlearning the idea that slowing down somehow meant falling behind. But instead, learning to trust that my pace could be different. My process could be different. My success could be built differently. As I integrated more of that alignment, again, more of the intuition, more intentional structure, and more awareness of my own energy, I found that my work became not only more sustainable, but more impactful because I was no longer operating from a place of depletion. I was operating from a place of clarity. If you want to begin integrating this into your own business, here's where I want you to start. Notice this week your energy patterns just across the week. Identify where you feel most creative, most focused, and most reflective. Align different types of work with some of those states. So keep in mind your flow, and then build your task list to accommodate that and create structure, but let it be flexible enough to adapt. So begin to ask yourself, is this aligned right now with myself, or am I forcing it today? Is this sustainable, or am I overriding my capacity? And allow your business to evolve from that awareness. That's huge. What I want to leave you with is this. You do not have to adopt a model of success that costs you your energy, your health, or your sense of self. But instead, you can build a business that honors how you actually function, a business that integrates both structure and intuition, that allows for growth, but also allows for rest, that creates not just income, but also longevity. Your action step this week is this. Identify one place in your business where you are forcing something instead of actually aligning with what your insides say. And ask yourself what it would look like to approach that differently. So I'll leave that with you this week. And if this resonated, I'd love to hear your insights. What's coming up? You can reach out on Instagram, DM me, Andrea DLC_coach, and share with me. Share with us what's shifted, because success is not just about what you build. It's about how you build it. And most importantly, it's who you become in the process of building it. Until next time, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time. Take care.